There we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. How are y'all doing?
Great.
Good.
All right. Great.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Did everybody get a chance to look at the agenda Randy sent out?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So welcome to our first meeting of the Racial and Social Equity Standing Committee for ANC 34G. We finally made it. We still got folks coming in. Okay, so that is, just to let everybody know, on the iPhone, Renee Inman, I'm going to rename her.
Hello, everyone. I'm at the hair shop, so I can't show my face.
You actually could, Renee. You just choosing not to.
No.
Okay. We'll get started. I definitely want to try. I know some days we're probably going to run over, but I want to try to keep us to an hour so that we don't get burnt out, because we definitely have a lot on our plate. And Randy set up the first agenda, and I'm really appreciative of that. I'm in the middle of some grad school work, and I had a final today, so Randy kind of took the lead on that for me, which I really, really appreciate. And what we wanted to do initially was to discuss the committee structure. So we've gotten a few emails, and there's definitely some thought about how we should be structured, but we wanted to spend some time today and kind of get everybody's thoughts and feedback on how we want to structure ourselves as a committee. Meeting frequency, do we want to keep this date and this time? How often do we want to meet? As well as we have to report out to the ANC. So we'll need somebody to kind of take notes. Do we want a permanent secretary, or do we want to switch it off at each meeting? How do we want to do that? Is everybody okay with having that discussion for the first few minutes before we move forward on the other work?
Yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
Cal, you see you have your hand up.
Yeah, there's a few other points, like how do we communicate with over email? Are we going to have a listserv? How are we going to make decisions? What's our decision-making process? And how are we going to work with the ANC from our end?
Okay, we can add all of that in there. There's a lot of things that we could discuss in terms of like a governance structure, but I mean, this will at least get us off the ground.
We could have a subgroup go off and do that. We actually started to do that just before the task force ran out.
That's what I was kind of thinking. So we'll definitely keep that in mind. It's nothing we're going to solve tonight, but at least we can get everybody's feedback. And if everybody's in agreement, maybe form that subgroup and let them start working. Randy, is there anything that I missed with the intro on this, or do you want to add anything to it?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay. So to start off, what do you guys think about a subgroup? I think Cal has a good suggestion, because there are quite a few things we need to kind of tackle in terms of how do we organize ourselves and how we're going to be governed. Do you guys think a subgroup is something that's a good idea? What's your thoughts? Oh, y'all are so quiet.
I think a subgroup is good.
What is the subgroup for?
I'm reading Cal's chat.
Cal, what did you say in the chat?
I just put the list of questions, including some of the ones you mentioned and some of the ones I had this already before the meeting. That the subgroup. So Carl, the subgroup would be to look at how we are going to organize, structure, and operate and make decisions, and come back. The idea is that we would come back to this group, and then for consideration, what we come up with. I just want to say, I think we have an opportunity here, because if we're going to be dismantling racism, I think that one of the things we ought to do is look at how the internal structures that organizations use actually reinforce the dominant paradigm that we're in, because it's the air we all breathe, and it doesn't even matter what race you are. So I think that's something that we could be looking at with the subgroup as we consider how to answer some of these questions.
Any other thoughts?
My only thought is just, I think sometimes it's very easy to start to create like 1,000 subgroups to tackle each issue. So I think it's helpful just to figure out as a body what it is that we're doing and where there are subgroups that can just be very helpful in terms of efficiency to come up with proposals and bring them back. So I'm not opposing what Cal's saying, but I'm just mentioning that because I think that that's, sometimes it's just then like every concept then gets handed out in any committee to then subcommittees, and you have 1,000 subcommittees. So I think it would be helpful if we had a sense of what we're trying to do, where it's substantive work, that's the body's intention, where we can be efficient by having a group that wants to think about process and procedure, come back with some proposals, and then we can discuss it and have a further conversation or add or draw out and then come to a conclusion. I'm all for that.
One thing too, that I think we got to tackle in that vein is just our mission statement. And that's one thing that has to go back to the ANC for concurrence. So I think we have to, that's probably a discussion we might want to have amongst ourselves in this broader group, and possibly the subgroup can refine it. But that's something that I think I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts, because I've gotten a couple emails and it seems like there's a couple different train of thoughts in terms of what this group should be doing. We definitely have the recommendations from the task force on racism, and I'll share a link to a Google Doc where everyone can go in and grab those and see what those recommendations are that we need to start working on the implementation for. That's going to take a lot of our bandwidth. But then we're going to have things that pop up and bubble up in the community. There's an issue right now that I'm dealing with the 2nd district police district in terms of non-vehicle traffic stops in 2D of in terms of the majority of those stops being of Black individuals. So there'll be like, those type of issues that we might want to bring over to the standing committee. Lafayette could have been an issue that we could have brought over here too. But I think however we structure ourselves, we kind of need to maybe, have a discussion about just what some of our ideas are in terms of how that would be, trickled down to a mission statement. I don't know if everybody kind of sees us as working on, different things, or, more focused on the task force on racism, but that's something that we should probably discuss and see what everybody is thinking about. Randy, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it could be broader than that too, because there are going to be issues that will come up before the ANC, or issues that the committee believes the ANC should be aware of and should be cognizant of and should address, that may not come before the ANC directly, but the committee believes that it's has an equity element and that is something that we ought to consider. I mean, I'm thinking of one thing I'm working on right now, and that is the removal of lead service line in DC water. And there's a big equity issue here, because a lot of the people who are most affected by this are people of color. And so it really is an equity issue that affects the district across all 8 wards. And that's something that in working with DC Water to try to figure out how to do this, and it's a big undertaking, contributions from the committee could be very useful. And so I think there are some areas where the committee might initiate that kind of action, as well as just being reactive to whatever the ANC would like its help on.
Do you see us as primarily focusing on issues in our very specific, very local geographic area? Or do you see a role for us to act as a megaphone to help amplify voices in other parts of the city?
Both for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Randy's example of the lead pipe issue in terms of water is a good example of that megaphone issue, because lead in water, those lead pipes run throughout the city, not just in our issue. Now, the second district issue is kind of near and dear, to us, because we're governed by second district. But I think definitely just in terms of, I'm glad you brought that up, Sarah, in terms of how I kind of see us is being both, looking at both of those lenses.
And I would think, just on what you were saying, Lisa, about the 2D issue, I mean, that's the kind of situation where I think, that's a perfect example of where, we should look at it, and having this committee issue a proposed statement to the ANC. I mean, having condemnation from our ANC over racist policing is really important, and it's important that it happens swiftly. And that's an advantage of having, this existing committee that can look at something, that can address it, and that can provide proposed language very quickly.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was kind of my train of thought. It would be great, because I see us, we got a lot of long-term work that we're doing, but I think the 2D work might give us a short-term win and actually get us, working on a project and having, a product fairly quickly. I am meeting with council members for Ward 3 and 4. I believe it's on Monday. And just to give you guys background of this, because I don't know if everyone was at the ANC meeting or not, but council member Janice Lewis George. So, our ANC is covered by both council member Lewis George, and council member Mary Che. So we're divided between Wards 3 and 4. And council member Lewis George had a community safety meeting probably about 2 weeks ago, where MPD Chief Conti was a guest speaker, as well as the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety. Oh, this is Lisa Oakley. I'm so glad she could make it. I'm trying to let her connect. Hi, Lisa Oakley. And then there was another lady that joined that meeting that,
Hello.
hey.
Hey, Lisa.
That,
I'm sorry to be so late.
That's okay. That was on, or she's responsible for gun violence prevention. And so they asked me to kind of attend that meeting and speak just from, a community standpoint on public safety. And one of the things that I talked about was the recent Police Reform Commission's report. And it was relatively just released. And within that report, they had some statistics, which I thought were very interesting. One of the statistics was a breakdown of non-traffic stops by by police district. So that means basically a stop of an individual not based on a traffic violation or traffic, so non-traffic. And the reason why they did non-traffic, according to the report, is it was more susceptible to bias. So that's like somebody that you're seeing and you're stopping. And right before I attended that meeting, I had a conversation with the neighbor behind me, and they live on Oregon Avenue, have lived here for years. And they were telling me about the family was walking down Oregon Avenue. And this was when Oregon Avenue was under construction, so not that long ago. And they got harassed by the police for walking down Oregon. And they were in, I guess, part of it where, there wasn't no sidewalk. So they had to walk down the street to get down there. And they lived directly on Oregon Avenue. So they were explaining to the officer about, well, we're just trying to get to the park. There's no other way for us to walk. There's no sidewalks. And he was basically threatening to ticket the family. So the family was very upset. And, one of the members was, pretty fearful about the incident. And so I thought it was very curious. And I had seen, another incident that was sort of similar, which was a non-traffic stop, and it ended up in, police harassment. So when I looked at the statistics, So second district covers not only our ANC, but several other ANCs. Maybe down to, I'm not sure if they go down to Georgetown, how far they go down. And they had the percentage of minorities within that district, or Blacks particular, and then the percentage of Blacks that were stopped. And they definitely had the right percentages. I think it was the same percentages that I believe our housing group came up with. So maybe 7% Black, African-American, and the percentage of non-traffic stops were, I believe, 65%, which is, and that is so disparate. I mean, that is just, that number just like jumped out like crazy. They had all the other districts listed. And when you looked at the percentage, some of them, especially in Ward 7, Ward 8, some of the other non-white wards, there wasn't that much disparity based on the percentage of the population and the percentage of that population being stopped. It was still rather high, but it was a little bit more in line than a 7% population comprising 65% of the stops. So I brought that up, and MPD did not answer. I got radio silence. So I was like, okay, maybe they will come back to me. And about 10 minutes into the meeting, Councilmember Louis George said, you know, MPD, you guys didn't answer Commissioner Gore's question. Do you want to answer? They still did not answer, still radio silence. So I basically tied in a statement that the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety made about, you know, the community and engagement and all this. And, you know, basically said, you can't have that when you have these disparities and when you don't address them. And so he did talk a little bit about the issue, and basically said that they were surprised and that they wanted to know what those numbers meant as well. So shortly after that, I got a personal phone call from one of the deputy commanders. And he basically said that they didn't have an answer. He said they were shocked. I don't know if they had, you know, read the entire Police Reform Commission report. A lot of times at that level, they might get the high-end recommendations. So I don't know if MPD had gone through and looked at that data and saw those numbers, you know, per district, and in particularly second district. But he said they couldn't answer because they did not have an answer, but he wanted to call me back to talk about it. And he pretty much gave me a roadmap of what he thought we should do. And I think it would be a great idea for the standing committee to help in that. And one of the things he said was this needs to go straight to the chief of police. So I think, you know, once we have that initial, and I'm kind of curious to see what our council members' perspectives are going to be, if they would want a separate meeting. But I think, you know, just looking at those numbers, looking at the report, seeing some of the issues with getting data out of MPD to kind of support. I mean, that number has to be broken down. There's no way as a community, we just can't sit on that number. You just can't tell me that 7% of the population is going to comprise 65% of the stock.
Crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Is that report publicly available?
Yeah. Yeah. It is publicly available. And I'm so shocked that no one has picked up on and, you know, is hollering about those stats. It's crazy. So there's definitely an opportunity for, you know, MPD to talk to the community. To me, that deserves a community explanation.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lisa, you said second district covers 3, 4G and down to Georgetown.
I'm not sure if they go that far down.
Yes, they do.
Do they? Okay, I thought they did. Yeah.
It even includes DuPont Circle. It's a very large area, even bigger than Ward 3. So
it has 7% Black, African American, and 65% of the non-traffic stops are Black.
And I might have that. Let me see.
The MPD is required with the NEAR Act to compile documentation of their, basically their stop and frisk, but also I believe there are obligations with stop and contact, and they have general orders that they have to comply with for the basis for stops and basis for circumstances where they stop. And I think this is like a really perfect opportunity. And I appreciate Lisa raising this with everyone. I mean, this is a moment where there's a number of things that we could do. One is we can demand the documentation because they are supposed to have it. We can demand training of the officers with regard to how they're carrying out stopping contacts. We can also open up an opportunity for people in 2D or at least within the ANC district to report to this committee or somebody when they're experiencing what Lisa was talking about with the people who are on Oregon Avenue. There should be a clear avenue for people to be able to report police misconduct and this kind of abusive behavior. Because when it happens to you, you know, for so many folks, it's just, you're dealing with it, but like, what do you do after that? You're going to complain to the police? Who do you complain to? So if there was a clear avenue to complain here, and then we had a mechanism for immediately responding, for asking questions, for demanding answers, and then again, going back to address this in terms of disciplining the police who are carrying out racial profiling stops, as well as demanding larger training be done, because that all is supposed to have occurred. And clearly, you know, I know from our litigation that it's not occurred, but this is a great opportunity.
Yeah. Randy?
Yeah, just to put a little historical perspective on this, I think it was probably 3 years ago, something like two or 3 years ago, we had a presentation by MPD about the NEAR Act and all of the requirements there for keeping data and reporting data. And we were extraordinarily disappointed because they either were not collecting the data or were not making it available. And I was just looking to see whether I could find I thought we had a resolution on that. But I know we had a meeting on it and we discussed it at some length, and we're really disappointed in their compliance with the NEAR Act. And so that's certainly something worth revisiting.
This is, let me see if I can get on here. This is Ron. Is everybody hearing me?
Yes. Hi, Ron.
Hi. I was wondering, you've got departments in the DC government, one of them is being Inspector General, who's supposed to look at compliance and report back. And it seems like there's a resource right there along with audit that's either looking at certain metrics or not even paying attention, or we don't have an avenue to that. But there, once you have an official requirement to report and you're not doing it, there should be a way to get the administrative agency that oversees that or is in charge of making sure it's in compliance to get them to do it. And it sounds like that's one of the problems in here. It's certainly not at the heart of the problem, but at least if somebody's not looking over somebody's shoulder here and saying, when you're in compliance, you need to be in compliance, they're not going to be in compliance. So there's not much policing of the police in terms of the IG office, maybe, and maybe they need to be a little more aware of some of these things that are coming up. I don't know why they're not.
To be honest with you, they are aware.
Right.
They are fully aware. And the reason that we're seeing these numbers now is because there's been forced compliance with NEAR Act reporting. And while it's not fully adequate, we wouldn't see these numbers otherwise. I mean, you know, bet you anything the Oregon stop doesn't make it into the list. So what we're seeing is just some of them, and you can see the vast disparity for those ones. So what really would make an impact from this group and from the ANC is not demanding internal reporting, is really demanding change, is saying that we as a community find this unacceptable. We will not allow the police to police this community in the way that they're doing it, that it's racist, that we don't condone it. And not only do we not condone it, but we're demanding change because what they're doing is not lawful. It's just simply not lawful. It is unconstitutional. It's race discrimination. You can't be profiling people and stopping them. And they're doing that obviously without reasonable suspicion. They're making a decision that somebody looks criminal, and they're making that decision based on race, not based on conduct. It's not possible to have these numbers in any other way. So it'd be really powerful for us to like just call the police on the carpet and say, we as a community, as an anti-racist community, are demanding that this end, and here's how we believe these are steps you should take, and you tell us what the steps are that you're going to take.
Tying this back into the process discussion, I would hope that we can come up with ways to communicate to the broader community what we are finding out, what we're thinking about, because people don't know this stuff. And I think it would be good to have a mechanism beyond just reporting to the ANC and having it come up when 16 people are on a Zoom watching it. I mean, maybe it's working with Jerry in his newsletter or the listservs or some other mechanism to make sure that people in the community are aware of this and brought into the conversation.
I agree.
That brings up the whole larger topic about community engagement, which I'm not suggesting we get into today, but that's a whole big topic of where we can definitely improve over what the task force was able to do.
So does that issue sound like something that you guys think we should put on our plate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Great.
And I'm wondering also about looking at traffic stops. And there's been a movement in other states. I don't know what DC is doing to prevent traffic stops for things like hanging from the rear view mirror or overly tinted windows, things that end up being pretty pretextual for race-based stops. And I wonder if this is also a moment to advocate for those kinds of changes in DC as well.
Well, I think that's a good point. And going back to Mara's point too, on the data issue, I'm not sure if they have the traffic stop data for that police commission reform report, but that is something that, we might want to see if we can take a look at as well in our 2D area. I'm sure those numbers on the traffic stops are going to be, fairly similar.
Do we have any idea about youth getting, addressed by the police just by being a young kid walking down the street in the neighborhood? Do we have any idea of infractions or problems with that where they are unjustly, singled out?
I don't have any information on that. If we got this data, I don't know if they have it, culled by age. That would be great. Gender would be great as well too. But that's something that we can maybe look for and see if they can help us parse through that data or give us the data disaggregated.
Yeah, because you have kids going out in the evening doing their thing that kids do.
Yeah.
Who gets
That's
bothered?
also where a hotline or an email reporting to us would make a difference, because most of that kind of general harassment is not going to be cataloged. The police aren't cataloging a lot of it. And having a place where kids or their parents or anyone else that's experiencing this can report to us, to know that there's a community that's that's got people's backs, that is strongly anti-racist and is willing to stand as a group up to the police when this kind of conduct is occurring, that would be great. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm sure kids in the neighborhood are, of course, being equally profiled based on race, but there should be a way to report it into a safe place, which would be us.
Like, and what you said is, who are they going to contact? The police when they're bothered? I mean, who do they go to?
Right.
I love the idea of our committee. I don't know how the logistics of how it would work, but of our committee being a safe place where people can report. And we, because we have the backing of the ANC, which is at least nominally a formal government entity, has a really big voice in publicizing that information. So I love your idea, Mara.
It seemed to me that this was in part, we have a recommendation from the community working group about this, for lack of a better term, racial response network, where people in the community could say, hey, it could be anything from, I'm just uncomfortable with what's happening in the community or how I was treated by the police, to there's actual oppressive act happening. And so it could sort of be a clearinghouse or a traffic director for how those things get where they go. Not saying that original concept of the network wasn't we wouldn't solve the problems, but we would be a place where people could come and say, somebody painted something nasty on the chalk in front of my house. I don't want to go to the police. Help.
Right.
Is there any mechanism for oversight of the police in the city? Is there any process that looks at that?
It's the DC Council and it's civil rights lawyers who sue them. It's really, and there's the DC auditor that looks at procedural things, but all of my opinion is that the internal police procedures are worthless. There's also an Office of Police Complaints. It has some effect at some point, but there are limited mechanisms, and some of the most important ones are the ones that we saw last summer on the streets, that when there is exposure about police conduct and people are mobilizing and they're in the streets, it shifts the political calculus, which is why we're seeing in the DC Council now so much more appetite for desperately needed police reform action.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So I will.
Lisa, yeah, I just wanted to jump in. I think this is a great first effort for us to embrace, for all the reasons everyone's been saying. And I think it gives us a chance to be more public and to kind of tell people what we're doing, and whether it communicate with other ANCs also, we'd figure out a little more about community engagement. People don't know this stuff, or a lot of people don't think about this who live in these neighborhoods. And I think it'd be a great first step for us. It will help us to kind of figure out the mechanics. How are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? How do we come up with statements? All that, the nitty gritty stuff. But I think it's wonderful to hear all of you wanting to address this, and I think it's a perfect first step anyway.
Great, thanks, Jean.
Is this getting us closer to a mission statement? I mean, well, I think this does contribute in some respects to focusing on a mission statement, on what we really intend to do with this group. Does anyone have anyone wants to volunteer to draft a mission statement?
Randy, I was getting ready to volunteer you.
I was afraid of that.
I'd be happy to help with anyone's drafting of a mission statement. I think it could be very straightforward. I mean, I think
it should be simple.
I think it should be transforming the racist legacy of Chevy Chase into being an anti-racist community. And that encompasses all the things that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We did draft a mission statement in our community working group, and I don't know if that would be a starting point.
Starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can count me in to help with that too, along with Mara and Randy.
Okay.
I think there are other areas that we're all interested in addressing, obviously including housing, which is so central right now, given what's happening with the comp plan, the amendments, the small area plan, and, the admission now that in fact the development in this area is not actually supposed to provide a shift in the legacy of the racist nature of housing in Chevy Chase, but actually just to provide more housing for rich people with some concept that then that alleviates a burden somewhere else, which I think is completely bogus. But I think it's really important.
That's not what we're doing.
But I think it's really important for this committee to be speaking out as this is, moving forward, and be able to speak in an anti-racist voice as to the nature of what's happening, the small area plan, proposed development, and really demanding, absolutely insisting, to the issues of affordable housing and racial diversity, and not allowing that to get swept under the rug here.
So the mission statement team, Cal, Mara, and Randy.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, Randy, did you accept?
I don't recall it accepting, but I guess I will.
Thank you.
For me too.
And with the other, so going back to the other kind of governance issues that Cal brought up, is there anyone that wants to work? I'm assuming, Cal, you want to kind of be on that. Does that same core 3 want to tackle that as well?
No.
Well,
I've got my plate full. I really have to say no.
Okay. Let me see if we can do an easy one. In terms of our meetings, do we want to keep Tuesdays? And we got to think about frequency, but do we want to keep Tuesdays at 7 p.m. a consistent meeting time?
It works.
For me, twice a month is, I could do it on Tuesdays, but the first Tuesday of every month, and sometimes the second Tuesday. I mean, how frequently are you talking about? More frequently than once a month? Or are you talking about weekly? I mean, because for me, the day of the week depends on the frequency.
Yeah.
I might. What'd you say, Randy?
I think only once a month, or we're going to burn out pretty quickly.
Oh.
At least we ought to start that. Maybe there are going to be occasions when we'll do it more frequently, but I think, considering that the ANC meets twice a month, and we've got other meetings, a lot of other meetings interspersed around that. I mean, it would be difficult for me to do more than once a month.
If we're going to do,
I can imagine once a month as the whole group, and as we proceed and pick up individual issues, subcommittees working on those issues might meet
as needed. Exactly. I think that's perfect. Yeah.
So if it's going to be once a month, and if it's going to be Tuesday, I would request the third Tuesday, because that's the least likely to have any collisions with anything for me.
Okay.
And I was just going to suggest, if there's some component that needs to report up to the ANC meeting, it's probably better to have this before the ANC meeting than right after one. That you just had, like, for example, you had one just last night.
Yeah.
The third Tuesday would be a good time, because we meet on the second and fourth Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. So third Tuesday at 7. I'll do a reoccurring. And then we all are on the email chain. So Renee Inman said she will also help with the mission statement. Randy, Cal, and Mara. So if you can add her to your email.
And when you're
working on that.
When you say email chain, I mean, I would love to do the listserv thing and see if we can all, because we did work really well for 2 out of the 3 working groups, and all but 1 member of the task force. So
Cal, if you want to set that up, I have no technical knowledge of how to do that. And I agree. I think it worked very well. Do you want to explain how you set that up and what it how it functions?
yeah, it's basically, it's exactly the same mechanism as the Chevy Chase listserv, except we wouldn't have to have one person moderating. We could have more than me. I'd love to have not just me do it, to distribute the responsibility and the privilege. And we had it like that with a main group, and then there were subgroup. That group could have as many subgroups as we wanted. So each of the working groups became a subgroup of the main group, and each had its own file sections, and and that sort of thing, and its own list of members.
Yeah, it was really good for emails, and you just send, an email to that one address and everybody got it. You could go in, like Hal said, and look at documents, for the group that you're on or all of the groups. It was really, I think, a good mechanism to kind of organize information, and especially the email issue. That was really good. And it's kind of, I like the historical
Archives,
of having like kind of an archive of this, the work that we're going to work on, because group members are going to change. But I think our historical archives are going to be very important going forward.
So I'd like to get permission, maybe just put your thumb up, permission that I can put you on the listserv, because last time I didn't do this step, and want to make sure everybody's on it.
Yeah.
Is that everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
All right, that's great. So that's one less thing to worry about. Okay.
I just want to say there might be a cost associated with it. I'm going to try to get the listserv operator to give it to us gratis, but it's like $20 a month after the first month, and he waived the fee last time, but I don't know if he'll do it again. Let me see if I can make my case.
Let us know, Cal, if he doesn't.
Yeah.
Randy, do you want to pivot real quick into the task force recommendations?
Yeah, what we've done in the resolutions that the commission passed was push a lot of the recommendations from the task force off to the committee to follow up and to implement. And so what we need to do, I think, first of all, is to do sort of an inventory of what the commission has assigned to the committee. And then we need to think about what our priorities are going to be. They're going to be the recommendations in 3 different areas: the housing, community, and education. And then we need to decide how we're going to divide those up, what we're going to try to tackle first, what are the most important, and how do we use our resources, our limited resources, to begin addressing those issues.
And I just put in a chat the link to, it's a document with all the combined recommendations from the working groups on there. So if you can grab that link, and you'll be able to take a look at it. Hopefully. So the community working group, there is 5, let me share my screen. I'll come back to that, Cal, because you're right. The hyperlink is to the video section, so I didn't get a chance to do that for the education ones, but that'll be really helpful, because if you click on it, it'll take you to the discussion during an ANC meeting. But yeah, I think we're going to have to, Randy, really look, because some of these are, I did not segregate which ones are going to, the ANC versus the standing committee. So they're all in here.
Right. But some of them, they should specifically address the ones that go to the standing committee, like recommendation 2, which it specifically says, and recommendation 5. Those were ones specifically that the commission task the standing committee to address.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to be pretty easy to pick out. It's just a matter of organizing them together and then beginning to decide how we're going to proceed with them.
Right. Okay. So what are y'all's thoughts on that? We had different committees on the task force on racism. So we had 3 separate committees that really dealt with this. I'm kind of thinking we might need the same structure. I just think we're never going to get through it if we're meeting as a group once a month. I think, you know, in between that meeting, we're going to have some committee work, really taking a hard look at these and figuring out the path forward.
I'm reluctant to have committees based on substantive issue areas the way we did before, just because I worry that makes us less nimble since we don't know all of the issues that are going to come up. I worry that it makes us less nimble to respond to things that we didn't anticipate. But yes, I agree that we have to divide up in some way, because how many people are we? 19 people. It's hard to work in a group of 19.
I think Sarah's making a really good point there. I mean, maybe rather than generalized issue, maybe it's specific issues as things arise. Like right now, we have the issue of the 2D racial profiling policing. That's, a particular thing that needs to get addressed, and it needs to get addressed in a timely fashion. And maybe there's a group of folks who want to work on that. And as other things develop, or currently there's obviously the issue of housing and what's happening with that, which is also timely and needs to be addressed. And so I think that's a very good point, that maybe we should think about it in that way, so that we can be nimble. We can address very specific things that need concrete responses and recommendations in the near term.
Maybe what we need is the substantive area subcommittees, but also a subcommittee specifically designed to be strike force, essentially, to react quickly to any issue that comes up, to bring it before the full committee if it's necessary, but also to address it in a very timely way. So we have a group of people who are just devoted to doing that.
I don't know if that works, Randy, because there are different responses to different topic areas. The people who might respond to policy proposals in housing are not necessarily going to be very skilled at responding to the police on their overreach. I mean, there's sort of different skills, different technical knowledge.
Well, I was thinking having the 3 or more subcommittees devoted to substantive areas like housing, for instance. But then you, in addition to that, have another group that would be sort of a jack of all trades, the ones who would tackle the specific problems as they came up. Maybe that's not going to work. I don't know.
I think it makes more sense. We're going to have a listserv, hopefully, with Cal's help. And then if something arises, we can put out there and say, who can tackle this? Who can be on this? And then people who have an area of expertise or care about something, so deeply, or have the bandwidth at that moment, can jump on and tackle things as they arise. I mean, the thing about the standing committees and the subcommittees is that, there are probably a number of us who have interests in multiple areas, and then we're just redispersing this committee out. That's why I'm sort of thinking more in the arena of, is there something, where we're tackling particular things, people jumping in to tackle those things, as opposed to just disaggregating this group into separate bodies.
Or maybe what we should do is look at all the recommendations, from those reports and figure out what are higher priorities. And it could be based on what's happening now, like obviously housing, and but there might be other things buried in there that we should be looking at sooner rather than later. Maybe organize it that way instead of by separating topics.
And when
I
we're
wanna-
talking about the, lacking substantive knowledge on certain issues that we might still think are important, would it be more something that the working group would do to inform itself by perhaps calling in an expert to speak to us? Or would that be for the whole group in order for us to determine whether or not we want to move forward in a given way as a larger, priority? I think the point about lacking some of the knowledge about some of the substantive issues is a big one, because we want to make sure that we can move swiftly. But that means starting with the right information.
But I think maybe, I tend to agree with what Mara is saying here, is that I do think if the working groups identify issues that are pressing by virtue of, things happening out in the world or whatever, and then the working group brings it to this bigger group, either in a regular meeting or in a special meeting, to sort of put it out there and say, we need help in taking action on this. We'll see who's available, who's got the bandwidth at that moment, or the connections or the expertise to move it forward, and just leave it sort of the creation of those strike forces, Randy, as Randy puts it, open to this whole group deciding how best to go after a problem.
And I think, in what Ron, adding to what Ron said, until we settled sort of on a mission statement, exactly what we're trying to do, I think it would be a little early for us to try to completely organize against an array of issues before we've even decided, A, what's our mission statement, and B, done that inventory of the recommendations from the working group or the task force that fall on the committee.
So I want to suggest that we hold off on forming the kinds of working groups we had before, where they were along the lines of areas of focus, until we've had a chance to sift through and sort through the recommendations. So I'm aligning with what Maurice just said and going a little further with it.
Any other thoughts?
And I will volunteer myself to be on the group that looks through the recommendations and inventories them. If anyone else wants to join in that effort, I'm raising my hand.
Here.
Thanks, Maurice. I'll definitely.
I'm sorry, that effort, can you describe that effort again? What it is and what's the outcome of it? I'm not clear on that.
From what I understood, there's a series of recommendations that were made from the task force that were sent to the ANC, and some of them specifically were by the ANC were decided to be handled by this standing committee. So I think all it is just going through all the recommendations and inventorying the ones that and documenting the ones that specifically fall on this committee, then bringing it to the next meeting and reporting out, here's all the things, and then we have a discussion about what we want to do with it. That was my understanding.
Oh, Maurice, I thought you were going to go a little further with it and say, based on that, here's recommendations of how we might form working groups.
I think that's another step. I don't want to put the cart before the horse on that one.
Happy to work with you, Maurice, if you want assistance.
All right, sounds like a plan. I might not have done a great job in taking notes this time, but it definitely sounds like this is a good spot to kind of wrap up and go over what we kind of, discuss next to dos. Maurice and Sarah, you guys will work on the working group recommendations and calling out the ones that specifically go to the standing committee. I'll help you. If you have any questions about it, just shoot me an email. I'll be glad to help you. Then we have Randy, Renee, Mara, and Cal working on the mission statement. We have Cal working on, Cal, what do you call that? The
I don't know. It's sort of this,
group?
it's operations, structure, organizing, decision-making. I don't know what you want to call that. I think Mara called it process and procedure. I don't know. It sounds a little narrow, actually, because we're also talking about how we structure the group. So just call it the structure group and we'll figure out what to call it.
Now, who all can help with Cal on that? So Renee Inman. Renee, anyone else on the process group?
Hi, this is Maria. I can help with that.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Maria. Okay. And then Cal, you are also going to set up the Google group for us.
The list, not Google group.
Or listserv?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Then I will send you, Cal, let me ask you a question. When do you think you could have a listserv set up?
Well, I already have them sort of blank. What I can't do is add people to them unless we get the upgraded service, because I can only invite everybody and it'll take everybody different lengths of time to respond to those invitations, unless we get in a commitment from everybody that they'll respond to the invitation within like 48 hours. But I can have the listserv set up, by the weekend. And maybe I'll get a response from the guy, but I'm not counting on it happening that fast.
Okay.
But that's the only obstacle, right? Oh, and I can't do subgroups until that upgrade happens either.
Okay.
If you invite us, would you also, the invitation is likely to get lost in my bulk mail folder. And so if you can also send an email to the, responding to the emails that we've been using to set up this meeting to say that you've sent an invitation, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, but you'll still have to find the invitation because it'll have the right link in it.
Once I know it's there, it's easy for me to find.
Well, I would rather see if I can get it upgraded first and then invite and then just put everybody on. Because that would be, because otherwise we'll have 5 people on and then 10 people on, and then we won't have everybody be able to have a conversation all together. And to me, that kind of erodes the democracy part of this. So
what platform is this, Cal?
Groups.io.
Lisa?
Yes.
Were we also going to have a group get together to respond to the policing issue that we
Yes, I was just getting ready to say that. So and that's why I asked Cal when he thought it could be set up. When I have my meeting, I'll just respond. If we have the group set up, I'll respond that way. But I'll update this group on the outcome of that meeting and what the council members are thinking. And then we could start formulating. I don't want to, I'm not too worried about stepping on toes, but I want to work as collaboratively with them as possible. And both of them, Mary Che's office and Councilmember Louis George's office, once they heard that presentation in the ANC, they immediately, so actually the 2 offices had an offline conversation, then they came back and said, we need to talk. So I'm really hoping this is going to be a positive, let's do this all together meeting. To have our 2 council members at least supporting us on this is going to make it a lot easier to make some waves, and hopefully we can expand it throughout the council. I'll definitely send you guys an update email, and then we can just, through the email chain or off the group, discuss how we want to proceed forward.
I'm going to look into it, but one of the things that happened for the task force is that the working groups couldn't talk to each other. We didn't know what anybody was doing. There were 3 completely separate meeting, and I'm going to see if I can set it up so that we can, at least any of us could email any of the groups. We won't be able to read the mail from those groups, but at least we could have an input where we could say, here's something, they're working on this to look at.
One thing, and I don't want to throw a wrench in things, and so if this is too hard, then forget it. But Slack was designed for exactly this purpose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Whole group conversations, part group conversations, individual PMs, work group 1, work group 2. This is exactly what Slack was made for.
Yeah.
And if people are willing to learn a new technology that is not difficult,
that's not, for me, that's not the issue. It's having to open up, has to be in a web browser. It has to open it up. Those are all stumbling, obstacles for me. Email is email. It's still going to be email.
You have to use either an app or an email page, and you have to check it. Which frankly I like, because I get too much email, and so I like a dedicated space to go look for things. Yes, it definitely takes an affirmative step to go get the information. And if people are willing to do that, it really, this is exactly what it was designed for.
I like those. I like the apps where it's combined in an app, and you go into that, and then you know where everything is. You're not confused with emails that are mixed into your other everyday emails.
Yeah, and it means
You
that
have different sections within the app that allow different types of interactions.
Yeah, and it means anyone can look at messages. If we have work group 1 and work group 2, anyone can go look at messages that have been sent in the past. And it means if the membership changes, it's easy to add them, and they'll have access to everything that's happened in the past.
And you house documents within the app?
I believe so.
Yeah. And maybe we'll even get Randy on Google Docs someday.
Sarah's right. Slack would be perfect for this.
Slack is
It adds a
great.
lot
I've
more
used it too.
Flexibility and able to do things that no group that we've had before has been able to do before. It's used by many organizations for just exactly this thing. Sarah's absolutely right.
Is there a way to,
It's very easy to use.
send out a preview or
a demo?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I assume if you go to the Slack webpage, there's a demo, but I haven't looked, so I don't know.
Sarah, is there a charge to it, or how does the pricing work?
I have to look at it. There is a lowest level that's free, and if we are only 20 odd people, that should fall well into the free version. But I'll double check.
Okay.
Boy, I'm sorry I opened my mouth for that last statement. If I hadn't said that, we would have been. So, yeah, I just hate going to the browser unless I absolutely have to. And I don't have a smartphone, so apps don't do anything for me.
There's also a desktop app.
That means running another app. Okay. I live off of, and by the way, to the person who said, all the emails are jumbled together, it's very simple to set up a thing where you can have them filtered into another folder. That's really, so that all your committee mail goes to the folder. And you can even have separate folders for each working group if you wanted to.
I'm not going to argue with you because I don't feel that strongly about it, but I think Slack would work well.
And there are a couple Slack sorry, I was just going to say, there's a couple Slack-like options too, and I don't know, Cal, if they would work better. There's Chanty, which is like a lesser Slack, and there's Microsoft Teams.
No way. Not Microsoft Teams, forget it. No, it got so many problems. But for me, the issue is having to go to a browser just to read messages from people and just to see what's going on and to get attachments. And I live off of email. I get, 200 emails a day, and that's where I spend my life. It's just, I don't run my browser all the time. And it's a heavyweight browser because it has several hundred tabs in it. I'm just me. That's just me. I know that I'm not typical of anybody else.
Some flexibility, Cal. Let's stay flexible.
Right.
We can look at it, and the bottom line is we have to do what's best for the entire group. To maintain our flexibility and efficiency as much as possible. So We're all gonna be bending a little bit to make this work.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
just
but
looking it up, and the free version of Slack is absolutely all we would need.
That sounds great. I'm for it.
Well, yeah.
I'll look at it and see if I'll take a, listen, I'm a technology evaluator among many other things. So I'll take a look at it and see if there's anything that would really get in the way, and probably not.
Set up a workspace in Slack and send out invitations.
That would be great.
I can tell you.
How does it work? So I have one.
I have to leave because I am late for something. So, but thank you all, and I'm excited to be working with everybody.
Thank you, Mara.
Thank you, Mara. Bye.
Okay, guys, we're about 7 minutes over. This was a great first meeting. Is there anything pressing that we need to hear before we wrap up?
I had one last thing. I wanted to ask Carl if last Thursday's presentation is online somewhere for those of us who got bumped off by Chairman Mendelson's show.
I actually went to that show later after the event. The answer is yes, should be. I think it should be on our website by now.
Okay.
I haven't checked my own website in the last day or two. I'm busy doing other things, but I think, Ron, it's there. I'm not 100% sure, but intentionally it's there, and it will be there if it's not there already. So just keep on checking it.
All right.
And my recommendation for everybody, no, I really can't ask everybody to do this, but I'm having a great time right now reading W.E.B. Du Bois' 1935 opus magnus called Black Reconstruction in America. Fabulous book. I've learned so much from it.
Perfect. We should probably end these meetings with a good recommendation like that. I love that. Okay, guys. This was fabulous. Thank you so much. And I'll send out the invite for the next meeting and watch your emails. We'll have a lot floating around.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Bye.
Thank you, Randy.
All right, thank you. Everybody have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, Peter, somebody that knows technology. Peter everybody's like hanging up. So I don't want to lose the recording. So I hit stop video and that should capture it.
Are you going to end the call? Because it just happens. You don't have to do anything.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I do this. I'm on 3 Zoom calls a week. Did you make a local recording or a?
I recorded to the cloud.
Okay, whose account is this?
Mine.
Yeah,
So
so
hit
just
stop.
end the meeting and you'll get a little notice that says the cloud recording was available after it's processed.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Cal.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.